Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where we spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. I like to think of this as both a material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, and designers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. Today's episode is a powerful testament to perseverance and purpose. We're joined by Bri and Dave, the creators of Sweetbriar Ridge in Minnesota, where 3 geodesic domes offer more than just a unique stay. They provide a sanctuary for healing. As a paramedic and outdoor educator, this couple's journey from vision to reality wasn't just about building a business. It was about creating a space where first responders, veterans, and anyone seeking connection with nature could find peace. What started as a dream in 2017 evolved into a 2-year battle with building inspectors, multiple engineering studies, and countless pivots. But through it all, their unwavering commitment to their mission, providing a place where the 3-day effect of nature could work its magic, kept them going. Now, with their first season behind them and their 3rd dome under construction, they're seeing firsthand how their perseverance is paying off in the lives of their guests. For anyone thinking about developing a unique property or wondering how to stay true to your mission when faced with seemingly insurmountable obstacles, this conversation offers both practical insights and inspiration. We'll explore everything from navigating small-town politics to creating spaces that prioritize healing over efficiency, and why sometimes the hardest path leads to the most meaningful destination. Let's do it. Bri and Dave, it's so great to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. We're excited to be here.
Tell the people where you're chatting to us from and where your property is.
Yeah, so we currently live in St. Paul, Minnesota, and our property is in Pine City, Minnesota, which is about 1 hour north of us from here.
Okay, that's not bad.
No.
But this is, from my understanding, this is not your first short-term rental, correct? You have kind of a history before the property that we're probably going to spend most of our time talking about. Let's dive in a little bit to that history just so we know what brought you to where you are now.
Sure. Actually, I would say it is our first time short-term rental.
Okay.
We did our house before our daughter was born, so she's 6. So we just rented our house out, and then we would leave to go like backpacking, camping on the weekends. But other than that, that's kind of our first time doing short-term rental. So we just dived right in with 3 domes. Pretty crazy.
Yeah, with a big-ish build, because it's taken you a while. You started in 2017.
That was when we first had the dream come to mind. So we went out to our friend's wedding, and it was outdoor wedding. It was a beautiful venue, and the photographer was also the owner. And we're like, we could do something like this. We can own land. And that's kind of when we first started thinking about it. And then just with having a baby and both of us working full time, it just wasn't a priority until finally David's job as a paramedic was pretty traumatic, just with COVID and things leading up to that. So we're like, we got to switch, we got to pivot, we got to do something else. So yeah, we started looking for land, and we looked at quite a bit of pieces of property and put offers on. 2 of them were accepted, but then because of restrictions and the type of building we wanted to do, we had to back out. And then finally in 2021, we found a piece of property that came up on the market that day. And David was like, we got to go see it. And I don't know if you want to talk more about that piece of property.
I think that I had looked at so many different pieces kind of by myself. And I had I feel like we both had like a wish list. Kind of like a want and a wish list. And this had had water on it, and it was an hour from the metro. And yeah, it just checked all the boxes, I thought. And I texted our realtor like 20 minutes into the exploration of the property, and I was like, this is it, put an offer in. And I told Brandon like half an hour later.
I did not think it was the right property. I was like, I don't think this is it. I don't think it's going to work. And we put an offer on that day because the market was so hot. Land was going so quickly. And so we didn't even think about zoning or any of that kind of stuff. We're like, we'll figure it out afterwards. We just have to get the piece of land first. So that was in June of 2021.
Bri, what didn't you like about the land?
Yeah, great question. I feel like I have high standards. I wanted like lakefront property. I wanted rolling hills. I also wanted like deciduous and coniferous forests. Like I wanted everything, and also be in our price range and an hour north of the metro. So
it had all of those things except like Brianna just is a slow burner when it comes to it. She needs to think for like a year.
Okay, which is fair for something as big as this. I feel like my husband and I are similar, and we just recently had started the land search again.
Mm-hmm.
Think we're not moving forward, but it reminded me how difficult searching for land is, because a lot of people talk about Zillow all the time and house hunting and all that, but you're like looking at like rooms and
Right.
you are still looking at potential. Potential is a big part of anything, but with land, it's like almost all potential.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're looking for features, you're looking for location, but other than that, all you're seeing are a bunch of drone photos usually, or just a bunch of photos of trees that's like one little spot
Mm-hmm.
on 10 acres of land or whatever. And it's like, how am I supposed to figure out a feeling from this? How am I supposed to figure out the logistics of this? How long did you spend searching for land, and what was that process like?
About 4 years, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just
Okay, you're patient.
I didn't want to be. We just didn't find. I mean, we found two pieces of property that we really really loved. One was 100 acres, but it was about 2.5 hours from the metro, and that had like every. I mean, that had the lakefront. That had everything. Um, and the guy that we put an offer in, and he kind of played games, and apparently, from what we found out later, he had somebody lined up, and so he was using us to drive the price up. And we
Oh,
kept, and which is looking back, we're really thankful because we wouldn't have made it because we went way out of our price.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, and then we put in a like final offer in, and then he suddenly sold it out from underneath us and was like, "Oh, actually, I sold it," so,
Mm-hmm.
which sucked at the
Which
time.
is like yeah, because I don't think people understand how much of an emotional roller coaster it is. Even the way that you're describing it with the two of you having different feelings, you show up and so much of it is about how you feel on that land, and two humans might have different feelings. And then you have to take that feeling and translate it to the other person to try and
Mhm.
convince them, if it's not logistics, right? Like you might have all the logistics on your side and you can be like, "Oh, it's an hour away. It has this much space, whatever."
Mm-hmm.
Um
Yeah, and
and
I was just to say,
go ahead.
thankfully, like our realtor was also our friend. He was very patient with us, and he would come out and hike the properties with us, like in his loafers and nice shoes. And finally, we're like, Steve, you don't have to do this. Like, we'll do the work, and you just help us close. And once we did close on the piece of property, it was a farmer. Her husband died, so she kind of parceled off this cattle field. So that's kind of what we're buying is like
Ah.
this random pasture in the middle of nowhere. We have this vision in our head, but I don't think anyone else saw that. And they thought we were really crazy and insane for doing this. But once we closed on it, 2 months later, as we were trying to build, we get this letter saying, actually, you bought the neighbor's farm and she owns the pasture that you were trying to buy. Like somehow the description got flipped in the closing papers.
Property IDs got switched, so,
What?
so we bought her farm and she kept the raw land.
Right.
So we had to go back and do it all over again.
Wait, so you ended up after closing with a completely different piece of land?
Yeah, we got the part of the parcel that she was gonna keep, like her 80 acres with the farmstead and her house on it, and then she got the 56 acres of raw land that we were trying to buy. So
Okay, but you got a house with it?
A
So
house,
did
yeah.
you get one hell of a deal,
we
or was
did.
this
We're
very
like,
disappointing?
this isn't what we thought, but so that was the whole ordeal having to re-go back and do all that. But that kind of set the story of our entire build. Everything from there just did not go as planned. And somehow we made it. So
It was a house and a barn and like 4 outbuildings and 4 horses. And I found out.
Wait, you got horses with
Oh, I
it?
found out later that if farm animals are left on the property when you close, they're yours. So technically, we had 4 horses at one point. So
They convey with the property.
yeah.
Okay, this is good to know. Wait, so do you own the four horses
no, so we just had
No.
to do a swap. So we got the land
now?
and she
Okay.
got her house back.
So you did end up with the land that you originally wanted.
But we couldn't. Yeah, we couldn't start
Okay.
developing for like another 6 months because we had to figure out like the legal ramifications of buying their own property and stuff.
Mhm.
Okay, so that was the first delay that you ran into. You bought the land. Okay, take me to this vision though. You before we dive into the logistics, which I do want to spend some time on because
Mhm.
I feel like that's really helpful to folks who are going through this. But you said you had a vision that other people didn't understand, and I think this idea, like this is something that I'm finding is very unique about people who create properties like this, is that we have an ability to really picture exactly what we want to create when you have nothing, not even land.
Mm-hmm.
What was your vision? Did you two develop it together? Like, where did it come from? How clear was it as you were looking for land?
Well, we originally were going to do a wedding venue because we had gone to that wedding and Brandon was like, I could do this. And I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, I just want to own property. So we kind of went through that process. We bought a book on it. We like reached out to a lady that did it who was like a coach. We paid her to coach us. And then
To
David,
do someone who had done a wedding venue?
she had done
yes.
several. And
Mm-hmm.
we sat
Okay.
down after that meeting. I was like, Brianna, I hate weddings. And she's like, yeah, I do too. And I'm like, why are we doing this then? And
Because
then,
there's good money in weddings. That is a fact.
right. Well, and I think that was the driving thing. But it was like, do we want to give up, every summer and fall to be part of weddings, which we don't
Right.
enjoy, And then,
Right.
so then we started
Yeah.
thinking about doing like kind of like a survival camp type thing. And we went out to Texas and we did like a 3-day survival course. And it was fun. But again, it was like the logistics of that just didn't make sense. And then,
Yeah, we kept coming back to land, like owning land and talking with our business mentor. He was like, I think you just got to find the right piece of land and then like it'll come to you.
Yeah.
And I think what inspired it is just like both of our professional history. So I'm a outdoor educator. So I'm an interpretive naturalist and I've been doing it 12, 13 years. So my whole job is to guide people outside in nature. And right now I'm located at an urban nature center right in the center of St. Paul, Minneapolis, the heart of the Twin Cities. And so I get a lot of immigrants, first generations, people who've never been outside. And so when they come, they literally think we have tigers and monkeys here or venomous snakes. And so it's just amazing to see like people like there's such a nature deficiency in our society and people are
Yeah.
so disconnected and they need more of nature and there's not enough spaces. And even with like all the state parks that Minnesota has, we're really great with our parks. Everything is booked out a year in advance. And so we love to go on our annual backpacking trip, or we can sleep on the hard ground, or we have the gear. But so many people don't have the gear, or it scares them, or that seems uncomfortable.
Yep.
And so that's kind of where this vision started to come. But also there was another piece, rather than just providing a luxurious stay in nature. I don't know if you want to share your job.
the wood, I grew up in like on the border of Canada. And like, so I grew up on a lake out in the woods. And like, that was just kind of, that was my childhood, was just being outside and fishing and hunting and I don't know. And then when we got married, we moved to St. Paul, which is when I was bad as a kid, my parents had threatened to send me to my grandparents because I lived in a city, and they're like, "You don't knock it off, you got to go live with your grandma and grandpa." And I'd be like, "No." And we'd go there for a week every year, and that was like the worst week of every years. I'd have to be like side by side with all these people. And now,
Was that the bad part about it? Was it the people, like being that close to that many people, or was it the lack of trees, or like what was the stark difference that your body just like rejected?
I think it was a combination of those. I like people for bits at a time, I guess.
Yep.
So to be right next to people all the time is exhausting, I think. And just
Yeah.
you just don't get any privacy. And like where I grew up, like it was pretty remote. So and then I remember coming back from my grandparents. We'd go every year in April, and we had like a half a mile long driveway, and I would jump out at the beginning of the driveway and run straight to the frog pond to listen to the frogs because I just felt like I needed to be centered. Like that was just
Yeah.
my thing. So moving to the city was hard, and then um, I don't know. You see a lot of awful stuff in the ambulance day after day, and try to like transition from like work mode and like seeing everybody's tragedy to like going into being a dad to being involved with friends and
Yeah.
stuff. I just felt like I didn't have a place for me to kind of center, I guess.
Yeah.
And
Is that common in your industry? I would imagine there's like a lot of turnover for that reason. Are there many people who are able to make a full career, like from start to finish, doing that kind of work and find that division? Or is this really common?
yeah, the average like life expectancy for a paramedic is about 6 years. I heard it's dropped to
Okay.
4. But if you do make it all the way through, it's rare that you do well. We have one of the highest suicide rates of any career outside of the military, and just about everybody's got some sort of addiction, whether it's a food addiction, alcohol. That's all hidden
Yeah.
just because we got
You need something to cope.
right.
Mm-hmm.
So mine was just going out to the woods. There's a place called the Boundary
Okay,
Waters.
well, that might be the healthiest addiction I've
Right.
ever heard.
That's not my only one. So I didn't handle it well for years. I finally started to get the help that I needed, but that was like every spring. My brother and I would go up to Boundary Waters, which is like a wilderness canoe area. I don't know if
Hmm.
you're familiar, and that was
Yep.
like, I don't know how Brianna let me. We didn't have kids then, but we'd go for 6 days. And I just found that by about day 4, all of a sudden I would just have this like emotional release. My brother's a nurse at Hennepin County ER, which is like the toughest ER in I don't know, in the Midwest, I would say. So we both have our own trauma. We both deal with it different ways, but we would go, out to the woods, and I was like, how can we share this?
Yeah.
Um,
How can we offer this to other people who are still in the thick of it and can't get out yet?
right. So that's our main vision behind Sweetbriar is to eventually. I would like to do it like 50%, where we just like, if we can figure out how to keep the lights on, just like have this as a place for people that are in police, fire, EMS, military, to just come out, and then you don't have to worry about gear. You don't have to worry about anything. You can just like sit and because I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it was day 3 or 4 usually, and I mean it always took me off guard. But I'd just be drinking my coffee in the morning, and all of a sudden it's just be like waterworks, and I'm not a
Mm.
big emotional person, but I would just like sob, and not for any specific reason. And then I would feel so much better, and I felt like I came back, and I
Yeah.
was like a better husband and a better dad, and so um, yeah,
What do you think it is that keeps so many people, because I haven't had that same experience in nature, but obviously I've had positive experiences in nature, as lots of people have that we've talked to on this podcast, but that's a select group. And we're all aware of this large group who exists in cities or suburbs and doesn't connect with nature as much. What do you think is stopping people from exploring those experiences? Just thinking about how we can tap into more of them and share that. I think first we have to think about why they're not doing it. Do you have thoughts on that?
That's a great question. I guess from the public I serve in the metro, a lot of them, if I think if you haven't been raised doing it or no one has brought you out in nature, I think it's harder for you to get into it. So very
Yeah.
similar to other outdoor sports like fishing or hunting or recreational things, it's really hard to like start it on your own. So unless it's already part of your
Yeah.
culture or part of your family, I think too, a lot of like my parents and our friends' parents like had a second home or had a lake cabin. And I think that's
Yeah.
less and less common now, just like financial means. Um, and then I just think there's like barriers of fears of like what people think the wilderness is and like what they might encounter there versus in reality what it could be. So
Yeah.
it is tricky. It's hard to we really want to make nature accessible. And coming from a nature center where everything is free or $5 because it's backed by the government, and
Right.
now to run a business and we have to charge certain prices, I just feel sick about it. But it to do something like this and do it well and to build it, it's expensive, and I don't think people realize that. And so there is this now financial barrier, but also we really wanted to be like in a location that you could pop up for a quick weekend and get away. So I think location is
Yeah.
important, and so I think that's why we really want to try to figure out a way, to offset it and make nature still accessible to those who really
I actually think the hour distance is
need
interesting
it.
because a lot of people will explore further from where they are
Mhm.
for price point, right?
Right.
Like the further you get out from a city. But to your point, what that does is that changes accessibility
Mhm.
depending on what kind of transportation you have, how much time you have.
Mhm.
Like it feels like the more privilege you have, the further you can go. And so an hour really is within that
Mhm.
accessible for folks who are in the city to make it feel less intimidating, especially if you already love nature and you know this place exists. 2.5 hours, whatever, is probably
Mhm.
not a big deal. But if it's your first time, that might be enough to be like, okay, I'm going to find something in the city that we're going to do this
Right,
weekend.
right, exactly. Yeah, and we're really close to Duluth, or they could come back to the metro if they're coming from somewhere else, or there's a lot of cute little towns along the way that they could explore. But I do feel like the closer you are, the more amenities you need to have to get people there. Whereas like I think farther away, it's like more than like scenic nature landscape that you need to have, if that makes sense, for people to be willing to drive a little bit farther. So it is this kind of constant balance of what you want to provide. I think in a way we did too good of a job inside of our domes, because a lot of people will just stay inside the dome for 2-3 days and never leave. And we're like, we have 56 acres and trails, like just step right outside, you know, you're so close to nature. But then there are people that will come and get out and go hiking and go to the local state park. So it's just kind of interesting to see, based on your build and the amenities that you offer, what type of clientele will come out.
Okay, so talk me through a little bit of what that property, the vision of what you were creating on the property. And then I want to dive into a little bit of the specifics of how you went about bringing that vision to life. So you started with 56 acres. You've mentioned that there were trails on the property, and you've mentioned that there's 3 glamping domes. How did you come to land on, because we've talked to so many people this season with multi-property or multi-rental, I don't know how to say it, several rentals on one property. And everyone does it a little bit differently. So I'm always curious into the why you chose what you did choose, just to help other people who are thinking through it.
Yeah, we had looked at a lot of different options, like canvas tents, tiny homes, lots of things, and I just didn't feel quite right about it. A-frames. David went on his annual trip to the Boundary Waters, and when he came back, I'm like, I think I figured it out. Like, I think we should do domes. He's like, why domes? I'm like, I don't know. Like, they just seem really fun and unique, and not a lot of people have stayed in them. And I think to be successful and set yourself apart, like, you have to have a unique build. So we went and stayed in one, and looked at like a manufacturer out in Colorado, and we were just kind of going back and forth. And I was like, I think we could do this. And
the price point was good too. I mean, it looked like, oh, these would like be a pretty reasonable option. They're not really. I mean, they are, but they're not. I mean, once you get
not reasonably priced, you mean?
Well, once you get into, you know, I mean, developing the raw land and pouring the slab and, you know, drilling your well and like all of that stuff needed to be done anyways. But then, I mean, you get the, like, I think the domes themselves are about 11,000 or something like that. But you build out the interior.
Okay, that is more than I would have thought. Yeah. And I mean, they're beautiful. I will drop pictures in here. They're beautiful, but it still feels a lot.
Well, and then if you want to do, I mean, we wanted it to be like, our theme was luxury in nature. So we wanted it to have in-floor heat, and then we wanted to have, you know, big walk-in shower and like all of these things. And so at the end of it, I think that we're probably as close to an A-frame or something similar as we would have been anyways, which is fine. But like, I think when you're starting the process and you're like, okay, how much money do we need? And then you're like, what?
Yeah.
So starting low and having your expectations low and then blowing your budget, I think, is a better option almost, because you're not overwhelmed by it. But
well, our budget got blown for a variety of reasons, but our original plan was to work with a studio who does shipping containers, and they were going to do a module unit, have it pre-built, drop it on the slab. We were going to set the domes up over top and be ready to go in a few months. And that's not how it went at all. So that was our original plan.
So what kind of roadblocks did you run into along the way?
So many.
Yeah, we looked for land that didn't have zoning for a long time. We finally found a spot that didn't have zoning, that was close. I don't know, checked all.
Because most of the zoning, can you just explain to folks who haven't been through this process, what about zoning gets in the way of a build like this?
So if it's zoned like agriculture, like you can put like an outbuilding or something like that on there, or if it's zoned residential, or there's all these stipulations that if it's zoned a certain way, you can only have, like, I think if it's zoned residential, you can only have like one building every 5 acres or something like that. And if it's agriculture, then it needs to be used for like storage and things like that. And so we found something with no zoning, meaning we could basically do whatever we wanted in theory.
Within an hour of the cities. It feels like normally to get no zoning, you have to go further out.
And that was another selling point for me. I was like, this doesn't have any zoning. This has got running water. It's got hardwood. It's got softwood. It's got, it's got like areas to build, but it also has like kind of deeper woods. So that's what I really liked about it. And then Brianna was pretty worried about building permits, but we went and got our building permits, and the guy was like a little bit difficult to work with, but I don't know. I finally just like went out and sat down with him, and I'm like, "This is what we're doing." And he's like, "Okay." And he wrote me a permit for 3 domes.
For $300. That was it. We just foundation only. Everything else is considered like not like semi-permanent or not permanent. So
Yeah.
mhm.
And then he said, "My only stipulation is you have to have a wood burning fireplace in there." And I was like,
Why?
"I don't."
Interesting.
Because he said that's how the DNR gets around like stuff by putting a wood burning stove.
The what? What's the DNR?
So Department of Natural Resources. So in Minnesota,
Okay.
they'll have like yurts, and so they're not permanent structures, but their heat source is wood. And I think that way you're not relying on like propane or electric, or if the power went out, like there'll always be a source of heat. So that's what we went in thinking. Like we're like, okay, great, we got our permit. Fall of 2021, we're gonna build spring 2022. We'll have all our contractors lined up. Like we didn't take out our construction loan yet. We wanted to wait till all the permitting zoning was good to go. And then we had all our contractors lined up that spring, and the week road restrictions lifted. So in Minnesota, the roads will freeze and thaw. So you have to wait for like heavy trucks to
Mud
go on.
season.
Yes, exactly.
We dealt with that in our build.
Yes.
Too.
And so it's just like, you never know when it's going to be. It's all dependent on that spring. And so that week it lifted, we get this letter in the mail that was like, "I'm your new building inspector for the area, and I've revoked your permit." Didn't say why, didn't say anything. And that was it. And
just a letter in the mail.
Just a letter. And our hearts just like sank. We're like, what? This cannot be possible. We put so much money into this. We're on a time crunch. Like we have to get these up to be able to pay our loan off. And so
at this point, had you ordered the domes?
Oh yeah, the domes have been ordered, like everything. Yeah.
So it wasn't like you could pivot and be like, okay, we're going to explore a different structure if we need to. It was like, oh, we've already put a bunch of money in.
We were all the way in.
All the way in, and we had all of our projections, everything for the bank approval, the appraisals, all based on, the domes. So
we had dug the well.
I think we might have installed power at that time. There was nothing; it was just raw land, so we didn't install power. Yeah.
So even trying to like flip it, was not really an option. Plus, we had $45,000 for the dome sitting in storage. So
right. Oh my God.
So
what did you find out?
Well, it ultimately took 2 years later, but we met with like the building inspector, and he was like, "What are these things? I've never heard of them before." And we're like, "How?"
So it's the same thing as the first guy of just like not being familiar with
it. And he was so worried like people are gonna die and suffocate in these domes. And once he found out we were gonna put a wood burning stove in there, like that set him over the edge. So it's just so interesting. Like depending on which inspector you work with and how they interpret the building code, you're gonna get something like completely different. And so they have incredible protections. Like building inspectors, they have the same immunity as police officers. So they basically get to make a decision, and then you're just like,
there's no accountability.
And there's no recourse. Like you can't. I mean, we called the state. Like we did. We tried so many different options, and they're like, "Sorry, he's the local building inspector. Like his word is law." So
we went to so many township meetings. We pled our case, and finally it got to a point like our bankers were like, "I think you need to hire an attorney." So we found an attorney. We also found through the Glamping Association an architect who works specifically in the outdoor hospitality field. And so it was meetings and hours of back and forth and kind of heated meetings with our architect and this building inspector, because our architect's like, "Hey, if I say it's okay, like it's okay, and your job is to like stamp it and move on."
Right. Literally, it is my job. This is what I'm trained in, is to tell you if it's okay.
Right, exactly. So it was just a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of stress. We even went to the township and pleaded our case. And looking back, it's a very small town, and I think they were afraid of change, and they were afraid of this campground coming in and ruining their community. And so I think that was a big thing that we were up against too as well. Which is hard when you want to come in and be a positive impact and help bring money to the community and help make a positive difference. But unless you're given that opportunity, I don't know, it's hard to break in.
Did you ever have a chance to speak at like a town meeting? Because I think in the world of short-term rentals, the reality is there are different kinds of developers, right? There's like the two of you who are extremely mission driven and have a clear vision of who you want to serve and how you want to serve them. And then there's big investors who are like, oh, I saw this glamping thing over here in Oregon that's wildly successful. I want to make money too. So let's build 12 of them. You know what I mean? And so the reality is, as a town, it is hard to tell which one is this, how worried should we be? But it feels like just one conversation with the two of you could give them a lot more of that information. Were there opportunities for that, or just with the inspector?
No, there was. They didn't care. They were like,
Really?
they're like, that's really nice, but I think there's like a pretty big divide, especially. I don't know if this is the case everywhere, but in Minnesota, like the area code up here is 612, so like everyone's called 612ers. And like that's like their own group of people, right? And like they're usually like a lot more liberal, and then you have like all the farmers and the miners in Minnesota, and they're very conservative. And so like there's this big divide. And I growing up, I mean, we called them Cityots, and we called them 612ers.
He's from the Iron Range, so he's from that small community.
So it was so hurtful when people were like, "Oh, you 612ers." I'm like, I'm not a 612er, but
yeah, they're questioning your identity. You're like, this is not how I identify.
But, and so I think that there's just this, we heard that several times. We just don't want you people to come down and, and bring all the riffraff from the cities. And, I don't know. And, you're going to tear up our roads, and you're going to do this. And I think it's just like a little bit of ignorance and just, I don't know, isolationist,
Yeah.
Which I understand.
Yeah, that happens everywhere for different reasons in different regions based on what you're trying to protect and what you're trying to change. Like, that is so real. And in this world of like unique stays, so much of what's being created are things that we just haven't seen a lot of before.
Right. Yeah.
And for those of us in like the internet world who are doing the research, we've seen it, right? Because we're trying to prove like, oh, okay, we discovered it somewhere and now we're doing a bunch of research. So we see how it can work. But someone who has never touched that is like, what are you doing? Like, I can see where that comes from. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I can see that fear.
Yeah, and
in protecting what you know.
And because of it, our the new building inspector wouldn't let us use the shipping containers, like the module unit. So we had to completely redesign the interior of the dome. And so it became where David and I were just going to be the general contractors and build it out ourselves, which we had no experience doing. David has had jobs that are more like physical, but
I did logging and HVAC and plumbing.
Oh, wow.
But that was,
okay.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I was a carpenter by any means. But
okay, but you seem like a really helpful guy to have around. You were a paramedic if anything goes wrong. You've worked in logging, which from what I have heard is one of the hardest and most dangerous careers out there. And you've also done plumbing and HVAC. Like,
you would think so. I'm not that helpful, but
well, we did it. We built it. Yeah. So because of that, because of the delay, and we're still having to pay on these loans, having to pay our contractors, and then because we had to completely pivot the design and the build, that just completely changed our budget. And so we had to go back to the bank and ask for more money, and get.
Well, we had to pay all our mortgage and stuff for 2 years with no income coming in during that time.
It was very scary. It was terrifying. It was like,
your full mortgage, not just the interest on it. You weren't construction loan anymore. You were at full mortgage.
Right.
Oh my God. Were you both still working full time at this point? Oh, thank God. Kind of.
Right.
Also, you're now GCing this while working full time.
I would not recommend that. I mean, we did it. We did what we had to, but it was a huge toll, like on our marriage, on like our mental health, the physical. Like there were so many nights where I would just wake up in the middle of the night and be like, are we going to make this? Like, are we going to lose our house? Like we have a daughter, are we ever going to get out of this situation? Like just so much.
That's right. You had a kid at the same time too.
It was a lot.
It was a tough couple of
So
years.
How did you GC it? Because it's an hour away. I'm assuming like you're working full-time jobs. Is this at night? You're driving an hour and then working on it? Is this every weekend? When are you doing this?
Yeah.
So at the time we were both working full-time, but all we were doing at the time was basically writing emails and making phone calls, trying to going to these township meetings and stuff. And like there wasn't any general contracting going on because we didn't have our building permits.
Which it still took a lot of time. Like it still took hours out of your week to do that, and just like to be committed to following through, because no one's going to follow through with you. So you have to be the one to care and go after it. So, that was hard.
And I think a lot of times in these situations, when people can't stop you, they're just going to hit you with as much paperwork and little stuff as possible to see like how bad you want it almost.
Yeah.
So
Which is
go ahead.
that's what's making me wonder now. Like, it is clear what this is showing me is how bad you wanted it. Some people do these things because they have the money and it seems like a good investment or whatever, and they just, and then it's up and running. And it feels like that is not what happened for you. And you proved through that how bad you want it. What was motivating you during that time when you were waking up in the middle of the night? Like, what was it that kept you going?
I think for me, it was my job. I just like so desperately needed out. And I think it's similar for her. I mean, we've talked about that. She's just like, I could just see like the light just kind of dying behind your eyes. And, I've been doing this for 15 years. So that's, I don't know, that's like 2.5 times what the average person does. And
Yeah.
I mean, I remember I had like a really bad suicide at work and calling Brianna, and I was just like, I'm done. I cannot do this anymore. And then 4 years later, I was still doing it, and
Yeah. And 4 years is a long
it's
time.
so long, right? And that's so many shifts. And so, I mean, that's kind of just what kept me going. It was just like, if this doesn't work, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't, I didn't go to college. I got a 2-year associate degree. So I don't, I could do construction again, but I feel like as hard as EMS is, it's really rewarding and you feel like you have a purpose.
Yeah.
So to go to a job where I didn't feel that, there was about a 6-month period where like I worked at like a poison control and something else, and it was awful, because I just sat at a desk and I was like, this is so meaningless. And so I just kind of put all my eggs in this basket, and I was just like, this is what I want to do. I want to help people that like help other people, right? And so like I don't know, I'm gonna do this or die trying type thing. And I think Brianna picked up on that too. And so we're just like, all right, this is gonna happen one way or the other. And
and then I just wasn't willing to take no for an answer. No one is going to care about your vision or your dream more than yourself. No one's going to do the work for you. We had such great friends and family like supporting us, but they got to a point where like after they saw setback after setback and doors closing, like maybe you should just give up, like maybe just file bankruptcy, like maybe just move on, like is this worth it? And like David was my why, and like there was no backing out. Like we just had to keep moving forward, and which I'm thankful that we did. But
if you're dreaming about a cabin build, or are in the midst of a build, or you just bought a place and are getting ready to host for the very first time, regardless of where you are, sometimes you just need a little help along the way. Shared experiences from someone who's been there, advice from someone who's learned a lot of lessons the hard way. That's me. Or a cheerleader as you finish up. All of these reasons are exactly why I started offering cabin consultations to our Instagram followers and friends who could use some specific one-on-one help. I can't promise to solve all your problems, but I can promise to be transparent about our build costs and process, our organization and project management systems, our favorite and least favorite tools for renting, how we market, and how we found ourselves with almost 80,000 Instagram followers and 100% occupancy in our first year of hosting at Cozy Rock. So if that sounds like it might help you, feel free to visit us at staycozycabin.com or on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin and sign up for a time to chat there. Yeah. I want to get to the good part because we only have 20 minutes left and I want to make sure that we get there. I just think that it's really beautiful the way that you all persevered through that, because a lot of people don't, or a lot of people don't run into those obstacles and don't really have such a clear direction as to why they're doing what they're doing. And you were really forced to have both of those.
And I think too, like we had never done this before. And like me coming up with the projections, working with contractors, trying to figure out the cost, like it was all brand new to us, zoning, but like pure perseverance, grit, determination, and our why is what kept us going. And so I just want to, if anyone hears our story, like if you have a big enough why and are willing not to take no as an answer and just pivot and find a new door, a new way, like you can do it. It's possible. If we can do it, you guys can do it.
Well, I think that like our motto kind of was, we'll figure it out. I would tell Brianna that all the time. We'd hit like another roadblock and be like, we'll figure it out. And like, you can figure just about anything out if you don't quit. Like, and there's been so many times. I mean, it sounds kind of pretentious because it's like, oh yeah, you can figure it. But I mean, if you're just like, no, I'm not going to be stopped by this, you'll figure it out. And that's kind of what we did.
Which is probably good training grounds for when you are a host, because the power is going to go out, something's going to break. You got to pivot, you'll figure it out. And like, I think we just became much more confident together as a couple and just individuals. So anyway.
I can't imagine going into it as a host. The stuff you run into now, like none of it can be as bad as like 2 years of paying a mortgage while like bureaucrats are just telling you no time after time after time.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what was the moment when this building inspector finally gave in and said, okay?
Well, he just continued to separate all of our permits into individual permits and like would break them down from foundation, now building permit, now plumbing permit, now electrical, and like times three. So I think by the end it was like 18 permits that we ended up paying. And finally, the last thing it came to was if it was going to pass the energy code in Minnesota. And our architect is like, it's not going to pass. It's a dome, like it's a tent. And he's saying it's a permanent structure because we really did push like what this structure could do. We did really build out the inside with like plumbing and heat, but it's still a tent.
So then you had to pass like a blow test in a tent, basically?
Well, so we weren't going to. So basically, like, I don't know what it was. Maybe we just beat the inspector down enough, but he was like, you're not going to pass. And I guess I don't care if you guys have to spend a ton of money on trying to heat this thing up, but here you go. And so, yeah, the day we got.
But we had to hire 3 engineering firms.
Yeah.
Even though like you have the production stats or whatever. Mm-hmm. So we had to hire 3 different engineering firms for the foundation. Mm-hmm. Our slab is 18 inches thick.
The highway is like 11, like.
So we have a 20.
Okay, that is very helpful context. Right. Thank you.
So like a normal house is on a 4-inch slab. Our slab is 18 inches
for this
thick.
tent. So yeah.
I mean, Elon Musk could send his rockets up to space off of our foundation, which is good, I guess. But
if you ever wanted to change structures, at least you know there's a lot you could do with it.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. So we got mechanical engineers, structural engineers, like everybody involved that said like, this is safe. No one's going to die. You can do this. And
he wanted to engineer for our driveway.
Just everything.
So we're like, fine. So we like called like 8 different firms and they're like, what? There is no structural.
Like we literally don't do this. Right. We've never been asked to do this.
But anyway, finally, once we got all of our building permits, like the following week, the township actually let the inspector go because he was giving.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. So after 2 years of delay,
I mean, yes, good for everyone else, but for you, it's like.
Yeah. So much money, so much time, so much stress. And then the following week, they implemented zoning, trying to say we couldn't do what we just did. And which was like.
Were you grandfathered in?
So they said they don't do grandfathering in. So again, we had to get our attorney involved. And he said, basically, all these permits you just paid proves that you can do this. So.
Okay, good. So they're worth it for something.
For something. Yeah, we were going to try to go back and get all our money back, but we had to keep it because they implemented zoning. So
we had 3 permits from the original inspector for $300. And then at the end we had, I think it was 18 permits and it was like $18,000.
Yeah.
And he had split
That was literally my next question. Right. What was the difference in cost?
Yeah, and that's not even like the increase of like all the changes that he made us do on top of it.
Right. It's none of the supplies or the things you had to adjust because of, or the engineers that you had to pay. That is just for the permits.
Or the delay. Yeah. None of that. So
how did you fund like all of these increases that you hadn't budgeted for? How did you make that happen without going bankrupt?
Mm-hmm. It was a miracle. True miracle. I mean, so as a outdoor educator and a paramedic, like we do not have like salaries that make a ton of money. And so like, as we were looking for land, we were just trying to squirrel away as much as we could. And then during COVID, we took advantage of like the low interest rates, refinanced our house that allowed us to do the down payment, 20% on the land. So that we were like paying out of our own, personal money. And when we went and got the construction loan, that was for the original plan with some contingency in there. But that basically was blown after we, paid all of our contractors, developed the land, and then we went back and found Entrepreneur Fund. and they gave us a couple small micro loans just for cash flow to help make the payments. And then after the changes, I had to go back, redo all our projections, redo what I thought everything was going to cost. And then we went back for another smaller construction loan to help us finish out the build, like the interior build of each of the domes. Because we were so close, but without the interior being done, we're not going to make any money.
You can't, yeah.
And from like one dome, we launched May of this year. And from 3 months later, buying like the same stuff, like a faucet was twice as expensive. So because of the increase in like cost of goods and supply demand, like even just within 3 months, you know, so this budget had just done saying, this is what I think it's going to cost us to do, completely just like thrown out the window. So anyway, but thankfully, because of Entrepreneur Fund, we got a good appraisal. They saw our vision. We were able to get another loan.
So you've been live now for about 6 months?
Mm-hmm. Yep. About
what
5.
has that?
Yeah.
Okay, 5 months. Now, luckily in Minnesota, I feel like those are a great 5
Mm-hmm.
months. Those are like the 5 months where everyone's getting outside.
Mm-hmm.
You launched at exactly the right moment, maybe 2 years later than you would have liked. But at least at the time of year, it wasn't like December
Mm-hmm.
that you were ready to go. What have those 5 months been like for you? What have you seen in terms of demand? What have you seen in terms of community response? Yeah, just take us through those last 5 months and what that has been like to see this dream come to life.
Yeah, maybe you should share about community response, David.
Community response has been very mixed.
Mm-hmm.
We've had, because I mean, we're kind of in the middle of the country. We're just surrounded by farms. So, I mean, I had my first interaction, some guy rolled up on his like 4-wheeler, like holding a bush light. He had a pistol on his hip. And he's like, what the hell are these things? A space colony? And I was like, oh, hi.
Hi, nice to meet
right.
you.
And he didn't have very many nice things to say.
Really?
And then we had like another guy show up, and he was like a school teacher, and he's like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. This is so cool. He's like, don't let people like push you around. He's like, people don't like change around here, but he's like, these are awesome. And then he gave me some like building tips. And so, I mean, they've been very mixed. And then that guy that showed up, I don't think he remembered coming over, because he came over about 2 months later, and he asked if I had seen his kite. And I was like, no. And he's like,
what?
He's like, these are really cool. And I was like, oh, thanks. That's not the response I got last time. And then he's like, do you want some maple syrup? So a little mixed.
Oh, yeah.
And then actually one of the people that showed up, her and her husband showed up, and they wanted to tour, and I showed it to him, and she's like, this place is beautiful. And then she's like, if you ever want help. And now she's like our full-time cleaner, ironically. So
I love that. This is when people start to see that with something like this, it's not just you. It's like you have to hire people to help you.
Right.
You bring business to local, right? Like there is so much more to it than just, you know, the unusual new domes that you see on the property.
Right.
And we made some cool connections with, there's a recovery service place in town. Pine City has a lot of, I don't know what it is, like addict services there, recovery centers. And so we brought them out and gave them a tour, and we're just trying to figure out how to partner with them. Like, how can we provide free stays? And they're going to do therapy sessions on site, and just talking about that 3-day effect of being in nature for 3 days for your brain to be able to reset, especially for addicts or people with PTSD. And so we really want our place to be a positive impact in the community, and not just to benefit those from the cities, but like also locally too. And just partnering with local businesses too. Like we have a partnership with the brewery there and the coffee shop. And so it's just been really fun just in our short amount of time that we've been there to be a part of the Chamber of Commerce, and just to get to know other business owners and be like, hey, like, we're not big and scary. We're here, you know, to make.
We're not 612ers.
Yeah. But for demand, we had no idea. We launched, our first guest was Memorial Weekend, and then my projections were like at best maybe 45% occupancy, and every month it just like blew us out of the water.
Which is still a smart way to do it for everyone listening.
Yes.
Under project and make sure you can make that work. Yeah. And then you're like beautifully surprised.
Exactly. Yeah. So, August, September, October, we were like 90-something% occupancy. Amazing. Which kind of made it hard to, you know, get in there and have to fix some things for maintenance or
October had the 1st and the 31st open, and that was the only day, which was
And that was it.
amazing for us.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just validation.
Oh my God,
right?
so well deserved.
Yeah.
Sorry, what did you say?
I said it's just validation after working so hard on something. And then, I mean, that was the scary thing is like we worked so hard to get there, and then we built it, and then it was like we went live, and I didn't know really what to expect. But
right.
Do people know about it?
Did you do any marketing during that 2 to 3 year period? What were you doing? I think people wonder about this a lot. Like, oh, now I open my doors and I'm totally relying on Airbnb to just direct people to me. But there are other ways to like build that up over the time of the build. What did you all do during that time?
Yeah. I think for like my mental sanity, I just started an Instagram account to like document our experience, documenting the build. For a while, I would get discouraged and not post on there, during the delay. But our friends and family would follow us and some people in the community. And as we just started building, we were making connections on Instagram with like travel influencers or other short-term rentals. So during that time, we were able to grow like our email subscriber list to over 1,000 people. And then we did
that's really good.
Yeah, we did like a big giveaway for like a 3-night stay, and that really helped like build that momentum. And so we're going to be doing that again. We just finished our second dome like 2 weeks ago, so we'll be doing another giveaway. And it's just been really fun to see. Like we weren't sure if like we're going to saturate the market by having 2-3 domes in one area, but we've had so many people reach out and say like, hey, we want to do multiple families come out, can we rent all 3?
Yeah.
So that's been really cool.
It feels like it opens it up, having multiple. This is, I think, the appeal to me of a property with multiple, is that I really like hosting couples, but you get to do that. But then also there's the opportunity for events or group gatherings, or to your point, if you wanted to do like services, you can do that with space for more people. Okay, you said we just opened the second one. So when you launched in May, was that just one dome?
It was just one because we didn't have the money yet to build out the other 2 domes, which is kind of scary. And so when I did the projections, I thought one dome would maybe pay for like half of like our monthly costs. And so I'm like, what are we going to do? How are we going to do cash flow? And then it completely blew our projections out of the water, which is amazing. So we're able to cover all of our costs, even with the added construction loans that we took on. So I'm excited to see what's in the future. We had talked about doing 6 domes, but there's something really magical about being the first people to stay on the property in that dome by yourself, and you get the full 56 acres. And so I don't know, we've gone back and forth, and like even though we've put in probably more money to make it luxurious, and like people feel perfection and people feel all these attention to details that really make it a unique place to stand out. Like everyone who comes in is just like, wow, way better than we expected. Like what we thought was going to be in this little tent, and better than like a 5-star hotel. And so we've thought about like maybe 3 is just fine, and like that might set us apart and like not feel this pressure to have to like keep developing, keep adding more. But we've seen this demand of, we do get a lot of couples and families, but then there are people who are like, it's just myself or a couple, and maybe we can't afford for 4 people. And so we thought about, can we offer something, on a smaller scale to meet those needs and those smaller price points and budgets. So that might be phase 2.
That's the beauty of 56 acres, though, is it feels like you have a lot of room to like wait and just start with 3 and see how it goes, but then a lot of room to play. And as you guys are the masters of, pivot where you see a need or like this isn't working, let's change and figure out what we want to do next. That also makes it really exciting because you're always dreaming about like what you could do next to better meet the needs, what you're learning from people who come.
Exactly. Yeah.
What has been your, okay, wait, are you both still full-time employed? Dave, have you been able to leave your job yet?
Yeah, so I dropped down to casual last fall, I think. So I worked like 1 or 2 shifts a month, and it's been great. I mean, it doesn't, I had gallbladder surgery like 36 hours ago. That's why I look like a zombie. But
I'm so sorry. Thank you for joining us.
That's right.
You want to be here.
But I just from like a mental health standpoint, like I feel like I'm a much better dad and a much better husband, and I'm just a lot more present. And I found like a really good therapist, and like working through 15 years of trauma has been not the most entertaining thing, but it's necessary. And so I don't know. I mean, I think that like all of our hard work is paid off. I mean, we have a long ways to go, and you still have the angst of like, what does the future hold, and will people still come out, and are we going to be able to? I mean, we had to take out a lot of loans to survive, and so are we going to be able to pay those? But from like a day-to-day perspective, like not getting on the truck every day, and I mean, I go build by myself in the woods, which is it's awesome, right? Like I don't, and I really, really enjoy it. And, I haven't seen someone die in like 6 months.
It's a good day.
It's been good. So,
man, the things that we take for granted not working in that line of work, you know what I mean? Like that, yeah, to just hear that and be like, oh shit, that is what happens every day is like just so many people don't, I think, have frame of reference even for what that must have been like.
So when I like am high strung and something happens at the property, David, like he's good about putting things in perspective, and like this isn't life and death, or like during that time of uncertainties, like even if we lose our house, like we still have each other, we still have our health, like we'll figure it out, so he was my good sounding board. And yeah, I'm still working full time, so during the build, like I would go up there every weekend to tile and help how I could, and we'd bring our daughter in tow. And like our second dome, we built out the interior in 38 days, which I would not recommend. And I think our electrician and plumber were like, okay, third dome, let's not have such a hard deadline, because that really pushed us. But we wanted to get in before the fall season. And when I'm not working, I'm doing emails, I'm doing our budget, I'm doing social media, I'm like thinking of the next thing. And so I'm probably working 20 plus hours just on our short-term rental alone.
On to earn all that passive income.
Yes, passive, very passive. Yeah.
Yeah.
No work at all.
Yeah, if you're ever looking for ideas, you should do a podcast on how to maintain a work-life balance when you do this.
Yeah, as soon as I find someone who has answers to that, I think that would be a good topic. Don't ask me. What has been your favorite part of hosting so far?
I get all the good parts. She does like the bills and like all the not fun stuff, but I get like
what do you get?
Well, I get to meet all the guests because I'm up there every day. So like I get to see, I don't know. I mean, I think this sounds kind of corny, but the cool thing for me is like just being able to see like how much people like the design, and like I didn't have anything to do with that. And so like
you picked it.
Why she did, and she doesn't really like to do design. But it's just been like really fun to have like, I don't know, I like my wife a lot, and so to have all these people be like, she's amazing, and I'm like, I know, right? Like, I don't know. So that's been fun to like. I had a couple come out and they're like, where did your wife go to school to get her master's in design? And I was like, no, she's got education on how to pick up snakes and stuff. But so just to see like all these people like love it so much, and just, I don't know, just be like, we can't get over like the details of this place and this and that has been really fun. And then I think like families, like when you have like families come out with kids and like the kids just get to be wild again, and they get to run down and play in the creek, and the dome was like got muddy handprints in it and stuff. And I mean, it's a pain, but at the same time, like that's what we're about. So.
And I think too, like it's so rare. Like we talk about this, like you go out to eat, you expect a good meal, and then you're disappointed. Like I could have made that at home better, and I spent all this money. And so it's like, how can we blow people's expectations and when we host them and they can come and stay? And like, even though we're not there, that they feel like this was personally designed and set up for them, like a welcome note or wine, or, they're celebrating their honeymoon, like leaving them their favorite treat, and just like think of all the things that they might need while they're there and already preemptively have it in place for them so that they can just check out and be present and be in nature and just let nature do what's meant to do, just like start that healing process, that they're not distracted by anything else, but to be present and just reconnect with their loved ones. And so I think being that bright spot in people's lives where like the world is so crazy and so hard, and like if you can just provide that, just like for them to like catch their breath before they go back into the world, I think is a big honor. And that's been a really fun perk of.
And it's not going to get you rich, but it makes it a lot more fun to like go the extra mile, Like I feel like if we ever had an accountant like sit down, they'd be like, you are wasting so much money. But it just, I don't know.
Same.
I mean, I was thinking about it on the way home like 2 weeks ago, but I was like, I like the old school bed and breakfast thing, like where you'd go and like the people would talk to you, and like it was like this interpersonal, I don't know, like relationship that you would kind of develop. And I think that's what I feel like there's so many people that do Airbnb, and it's just like, how can I make this as efficient as possible, right? Like, how do I?
Yes.
And I think that works for some people, but that's not what we want. We want to have like
That's right. There's different models.
right, a place to heal, a place to like reconnect, and if we don't get rich, that's fine. If we can keep our lights on, like,
Yeah.
I don't know. So
that is the interesting part about healing being one of the, I've never heard someone describe one of the goals of their property being that. But if that's the goal, you kind of have to obsess about the details, because any details that aren't right or disappoint you, as you were saying about like a meal, distracts you. And the more distracted you are, the less able you are to connect and heal, right? So it's like, it's almost, I think sometimes we think about all those details and all the nice things as like, luxury. I want it to be really nice for them, but it almost feels like more important that really what you're trying to do is just remove any obstacle to healing. And that's what all of the details are about.
Yeah, I love that you said that, like remove excess things, because you don't want it to feel cluttered in there. You want it to feel like clean and open, and you have just exactly what you need in that moment to make it a beautiful stay, and not anything more, not anything less. And so we're very clear about that divide. I think inside the dome, we offer a lot of amenities, but as soon as you walk outside, it's just this like stark contrast of like nature and just natural landscape and nothing more. So that's been a really fun honor to just see people use this space, and just the little notes they leave in our guest book, and a small glimpse into their lives of just how we could make it just a little better.
Yeah. What did the next 6 months look like for you guys?
Got one more dome to finish. This gallbladder thing kind of took us by surprise. So our deadline he told me 6 weeks. I can't lift more than 10 pounds, which is preposterous. So
preposterous.
I'm going to try to go a week, I think. But
I'm going to encourage you to wait a little longer than a week, but I'm not your doctor. It just feels like you might need a little longer than a week.
I just got this, like, I was just like laying in the hospital bed, and I'm like, man, I got to like dig fence posts, and I got to do this, and I got to do that. And I'm like, maybe.
So much to do. Hey, but you know what? Sometimes for healing to happen, you really have to get a lot of other things out of the way, you know? So maybe for a little bit, just clear your mind of those things and focus on the healing.
It is hard to take your own advice when you are a business owner. You get so caught up in it all and you forget like your purpose and your mission. But I think we're really excited about this last dome. It's going to be ADA accessible, just going back to wanting to make nature accessible, and serving, vets and military first responders. And the last theme is inspired by Shangwatana, which is a Dakota word for white pine. And so it's going to be green and natural tones and woods, and I think it'll be really tranquil. And so we're excited to get the third one up. And there's so many things. This is just the beginning of Sweetbriar. There's so many things we still want to do and add, and it could change and pivot. But I think just regrouping after the last build, kind of like the calm before the storm. Trying to build momentum again, and we'll have to be in touch with you again and kind of share what it looks like next May. Whole year.
I think this is a story many folks are going to want to follow. Can you tell them where they can find you so that they can also follow along as you finish up the third dome?
So you can find us at sweetbriarridgemn.com, or if you're on Instagram, it's just sweetbriar_ridge. Feel free to message us, shoot us an email. We'd be happy to chat and connect with other builders out there, other hosts.
Or come visit. Especially if you have some healing.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us, Janice. It's a pleasure.
Thanks so much for joining us. And if you liked what you heard, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or share some of your favorite parts over on Apple Podcast. If you have feedback or suggestions for the future, you can also find me on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin. Looking forward to next week.